Hi, my name is Reggie Williams, and I'm one of the executive directors of Black Film Space. Black Film Space is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting the careers of Black filmmakers. We host workshops, panels, and other community building events that are designed to support Black content creators. We also have a membership program that offers discounts to filmmaking resources, free events, a filmmaking database, grants, a mentorship program, and much more. In the next episode of the Black Film Space podcast, we talk with Silas Miami, a screenwriter based in Kenya. Silas wrote the film Supermoto, which had its world premiere at the 68th Berlin International Film Festival and was selected as a Kenyan Entry for Best Foreign Language Film at the 91st Academy Awards. We talk with Silas about Kenyan cinema, Afro bubblegum cinema, and much more. This episode was executive produced by Reggie Williams and Sino Gibson and edited by Elon P-Top. And now, on to our interview. All right, Silas, welcome to the Black Film Space podcast. How are you today?
I am doing all right. Yeah, I'm doing well.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So, want to talk to you about screenwriting and the filmmaking scene in Kenya. But first, I'd love to know what movie inspired you to pursue a career in filmmaking.
Good question. This is going to be I'm going to give you an odd answer.
I think the film that inspired me to start looking at films as something that could potentially be an option was Osufia in London. It's like an old Nollywood film, kind of like the OG ones. It was odd, but I just fell in love with it. I remember watching it in my mum's, because we had two televisions. There was the black and white that was downstairs, and then my mum had a JVC TV in her bedroom that she wouldn't allow anyone else to watch anything on.
Mm-hmm.
But I would sneak in the afternoon and watch Nollywood films, and that kind of stuck with me. Yeah, but I didn't think much of it, and I didn't think much about film after that until I was in university in undergrad.
So, what was it about that film that inspired you?
It was the performance, to be quite honest. For a long time, I thought I was going to be a singer or an actor, just some kind of performing. And they managed to capture the protagonist's expression of shock when he got to one of the bridges in London quite beautifully. And I remember thinking, yeah, I want to do that.
Got you.
I haven't actually been asked that question before.
This is what we do at Black Film Space.
Yeah, I've had to think.
We ask questions that you've never been asked before. So you wrote the film Supermoto.
Yeah, I co-wrote it with
co-wrote it.
A few other people, but yeah, it's a good time. Yeah, Supermoto, man.
How many people are credited for writing it?
4 people are credited for writing it. How that film came about was it's unlike anything that I've ever worked on. We were initially brought together to pitch our own project. So there's this call for a workshop type brain room is what they called it. It's like a bunch of writers could submit their proposals, and we got picked, and we ended up in a room, and we just heard each other's pitches. I don't even remember what I pitched, but it wasn't very good. And then I heard the creator and the director of Supermodo, Likarian. He pitched his concept, and he wanted to do something with a kid who turned into a superhero. It was ambiguous but interesting enough, and I helped him structure a bit of it in the workshop. But I don't necessarily love kids, so I was like, deuces, you guys, good luck, do your best.
Got you.
And then a few weeks later, I got an email from the producers asking me if I'd be interested in joining a writing team. So it was 4 of us. It was myself, Mugambi Ndiga, Wanjeri, and Kamau. And we just, for felt like 5 months, I'm a bit time blind, for a couple of months, we kind of just powered through writing this script, writing this story that had just generated from this idea of a kid being a superhero. Yeah.
That's such a dope concept, and we'll get into it later. But I'm really curious because I haven't co-written anything before, and I'm just curious to like exactly what that process is like. You know, is it like one of you at the computer? Do you have an assistant at the computer typing? Like, how does it flow with, you know, the dialogue? How do you make a final decision about what's going to be in the final draft of the script? And, you know, how many drafts did you all do before you said, okay, this is it, this is what we're shooting?
Yeah, really dope questions. You know, the process of filmmaking naturally lends itself to it being really collaborative, but yeah, writing it was dude, it felt like we were all kind of thrown into a mix and we had to figure out how to get the story out. It was the first time I had ever co-written anything. And I was in, I think, yeah, I was in film school. I was in my last year of undergrad. And it was brutal because I was studying in Cape Town and most of the writing was happening in Nairobi. So there were times when I'd literally like leave class and get on a plane and go to Kenya for like a writing week or like a weekend, and then get on a flight, come back. As soon as I'm out of the Uber, it's change clothes, back to class, and like work on my own projects for school. So it was a lot. Though, you know, we spent a lot of time on Skype, like hours and hours and hours, where we'd flesh out the whole story. And I think it helped that I was in film school at the time because it, you know, the tools that you kind of need to structure story were pretty fresh for me at the time. So it was easy to kind of help create some kind of order. We split up the work according to like acts, so to speak. It wasn't very overt. And we all kind of knew that at some point the story would have to come together somehow. And, you know, Mugambi, who was sort of heading the compilation of the story at the time, was pretty dope about kind of helping us all sound the same. So it was a lot of work. And then I ended up being the script supervisor on set and doing a majority of the translation because almost the entire script was written in English. And so, and you know, this is what happens when you kind of make films well, I don't want to say that, like it can change, but at the time we were running on a non-existent budget on a schedule that was ridiculous, and we just had to churn out a lot of work in a really small amount of time. Because how the project came about, it's difficult to describe to anyone who doesn't understand the NGO system in Africa, and how like folks can decide, hey, I want to come save the continent in some capacity, so I'll help them in some way. And so there's this organization that had been doing this for a few years, and it had some really, really good films, but the whole thing was they were pitching themselves as a training organization. So they'd bring in German mentors, quote unquote, come help with each department. So any of the traditional departments we understand in film had a German mentor teaching us how to make film.
I'm going to be frank. It doesn't sound like you're cool with that.
You know, there was a period where I was hindsight gives you some understanding of, you know, how such an experience might have affected you, and you try and understand like the space you were in when you were making certain decisions, or you were in certain environments. So now, yeah, I can comfortably say that it wasn't the best experience, regardless of, you know, how beautiful the project ended up looking. But yeah, I definitely think we do need to reconsider the relationship that the creative economy in Africa has with charity.
Hmm.
There's just way too much. There's too much room for I don't know. It's a tricky situation. You know, we can't step away from the fact that amazing stuff has been made through programs such as these. Um, but it was hard. If we look back at it and if we're completely realistic about it, it was hard. And I'm sure a lot of filmmakers will say that, you know, even making films a traditional way is hard. But yeah, it was uniquely different. It was unique.
Gotcha.
But you know, everyone had good intentions, so there's that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can go into that later if you're cool, but with that. But I'm fascinated because you said you were writing a script, but there was no set budget.
Technically there was a set budget because the organization, the production company that was hired to work with I guess they're also a production company. I don't know. They had some funding from the German government, and it was, you know, it was quite substantial in Kenyan figures. But a film is a film, and a film is expensive. But there was money, and you know, to their credit, a lot of it did go into the production. But the idea of the project still ran as this learning expedition. So
Hmm.
you would be doing regular filmmaking hours, and our compensation was a handshake because technically we were learning.
Got you. Got you.
Yeah. Hmm.
I understand. I'm trying to figure out who made the final decision. Like, okay, the script is complete.
It wasn't us, but the script writing mentors was finally satisfied with the version of the script that we got to. Look, you know, now that we talk about that experience, and again, it's the first time I'm kind of even like thinking about that period. So you're learning stuff and I'm learning stuff at the same time you are, because I haven't done any introspection whatsoever regarding that time. But the ridiculousness of a lot of the stage that had been set aside, we put in some amazing work into like getting the script to where it was. And I must say, even though it was frustrating at times, it was those conversations that we have over and over again, trying to figure out the kernel of the story and the kind of themes you wanted to explore and what each scene sort of meant in the greater context of representing a lived experience that could be recognized by most Kenyans, or at least many Kenyans. We ended up with a really strong story. But yeah, we didn't have final say about whether the story would be greenlit or not. In fact, there were moments when we were threatened with the story not being made because it didn't suit a certain expectation in many ways. And, you know,
Hmm.
I don't know. But we got there in the end. We got there. We got a story everyone was happy with, a script everyone was kind of really happy with, especially the director, who'd made a very deliberate and I think wise decision to step slightly back from the actual writing process, um, and he ended up just focusing his energy primarily in like pre-production because it kind of overlapped in some interesting way. So there's a I can't speak to what that model looks like, or the model that like the producers kind of use to secure the funding and get all these creatives in the same room and make this project happen. But um, we did it in a really short amount, like like tiny period. So everything felt
Hmm.
like it was intense at all times.
So there probably wasn't much room for procrastination, I imagine.
There's zero room for procrastination because people had been secured. Tickets had been booked for our wonderful mentors to come down and help Africans make films. Uh, um, no, we had to keep. we had to keep moving. We had to keep moving, and we did. You know, man, that writing team really, man, we got it together, man. I remember literally 9 hours Skype sessions almost every day, and then we'd break and go write our sections and try and piece it together. And it wasn't hard to figure out like what the tone was, because we were all we understood where the story was. All our characters were people we knew, so to speak. Like we knew the world, and that made it easy to find a tone and a balance that was, I don't know, that helped with the fluidity. It worked.
Congruent.
It worked. Yeah.
Yeah. Got you. Did the script turn out exactly, or did the film turn out exactly like the script was written?
A lot of it did. A lot of the script ended up in the film. But what I will say is the film turned out exactly like what the director wanted it to turn out as, and which was a win for us. It helped that I keep taking pauses because I'm thinking back at like how much work we were actually doing while we were shooting. Because Mugambi, who was one of the other writers, ended up being the child actor, because we had a child as our lead. He ended up being the child actor acting coach, and then I ended up having sort of the responsibility of making sure that the script actually worked and doing a lot of the translation, and some of it was done on the spot, some of it was done the night before we had to shoot. Wow. It was intense, but a lot of what was in the script ended up being shot, and I'm very proud of Likarion, the director, for making sure that happened, because he was a rebel on set, man.
Nice. How long did it take to shoot?
I think we did it in 22 days. We shot it in 22 days, and we had a few breaks in between. By break, I mean a day off over the weekend. And we shot it all in like one area, which is just outside Nairobi, about an hour outside Nairobi. And so the whole crew and cast had to stay in a Christian hostel, which is just so much, in one of the coldest parts of Kenya. And it was brutal. It was brutal, but it was fun, I guess. Yes, it was. No, it was fun.
It sounds like an adventurous experience. What barriers did you encounter along the way of completing this film?
What barriers can you think of? All of them. I often tell people making films in Africa is an act of God.
Wow.
It's just so much. So much. It was almost never ending. It was a lot. I wouldn't even know where to start. We had this overly ambitious story. The budget just couldn't stretch far enough to cover some of the things. There were instances where we had to churn out some of our own money to kind of make some stuff happen. We had a wonderful cast, but a lot of the action also required the participation of extras who we managed to get from the village that we were shooting. It was tricky. We had kids on set. Our lead actor was a child, and Whitney was right, children of the future, but my God, it'll be a while before I work on another set with kids. It was a lot. It was a lot. Anything that you think could go wrong went wrong, but we also kind of managed to make it work.
I mean, I haven't seen the film, but I've seen the trailer, and it looks like an amazing film. So it's interesting that you've brought up some of the I've asked you about the challenges, and it didn't seem like it was an easy feat, but the trailer and the final product, I'm sure, is amazing.
I think a lot of people who worked on the film are very forgiving of the experience because of how well the film turned out. Unexpectedly so, I'm going to say, because while we were shooting it, everything was just coming at us so quickly, and we had to respond and react, which I'm okay with. I'm good at doing that, but it doesn't give you kind of the room to have perspective on what the experience is or what you're coming out of the experience with until you see the film on the screen, and it's like, oh, okay, so it was worth it.
Yeah.
So this is one of those projects that, it was my first feature film, and it'll go down as like one of my favorite projects simply because of how it turned out. The experience itself, let's put it this way: I've kind of committed to ensuring that anyone who ever works on my set never ever has to go through that again. So I guess we can cop it up to a learning experience. But yeah, no, Africans deserve to work in spaces where they feel valued. So no.
Got you. That's absolutely reasonable.
Yeah.
And so you talked about the tone. People listening to this podcast probably haven't heard of this film or seen this film. So can you tell us more about what you want people to feel watching this movie? What this film is about.
The film follows a young girl, Jo, who's 9 or 12. My God, I really haven't gone over my log lines and synopses in a while. Who the young girl has a terminal illness, and her only desire is to become a superhero, like the comics that she grew up watching and reading and falling in love with. And so the community sort of comes together to make that dream happen, and inexplicable things happen around that. But I think ultimately, my hope is that the audience leaves with a sense of first, they're gonna cry. They're just gonna cry. It's just out there. You're gonna cry. I've warned you. It's gonna happen. Every single person who says they're not gonna cry cries. You're gonna cry. It's okay. We made it so you could cry. But I want them to leave feeling hopeful for like a community that can come together to make something happen because it's right, and not because they understand it necessarily, but because they want a beacon of theirs to see their value. So it's a really heartwarming film, and the kids love it. They just love it.
It's a wholesome movie, right?
Super wholesome. Again, I'm gonna have some moments of pauses here because I'm also like thinking back to my own experience watching it in theater, and putting aside the journey of even getting it to the screen and just watching it as objectively as as one possibly could from writing it, and it was just so full of joy and love and laughter. It's so funny. Kids are so funny, man. They're hilarious. Yeah, that's what I hope they come out of the theater with. Or, well, in this case, their living rooms, because no one is in theaters now.
Their bathrooms, they're watching it on their phone.
You know what I mean? Like they're wailing into their shower. I think that's the best way to watch it, honestly.
Get like one of those protector things for your phone. You can watch it while you're in the shower. All right, we're veering off here. So I'm gonna try to pronounce this name here, Wanuri Karhuyi.
Yay, Wanuri.
She directed Rafiki.
Yep. She did, yes.
She introduced the concept of Afro bubblegum.
She did.
In regards to African films. Can you explain to us what Afro bubblegum is?
Wanuri is probably going to stab me because I'm going to butcher this, but I think to be horrifically reductive, she just wants content coming out of Africa that represents joy, primarily. Just joy. African joy. And I think that's what, again, to be crudely reductive, and not in response to anything, not in response to necessarily the fact that a lot of the stories that have all of the films that have been made about Africa have been about, the trauma and the pain, which is valid and it's here, but there's also a flip side to our lived experience that includes celebration and hope and joy. And I feel like that's what she felt was missing in a lot of the work that was coming out. And she moved to try and get that idea of something joyous committed to film.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds beautiful. I don't have a vast understanding of African cinema,
Mm-hmm.
but I do feel like that same sort of concept can be applied here in the States. It seems like a lot of films with black characters tend to be, historical pieces around slavery or, Jim Crow era biographies.
Yeah, no, it's the sort of purveying narrative. And from my financial perspective, because I've operated between two industries over the past decade, the industry in Kenya and in Nairobi, which sometimes I feel like I'm not versed in, even though a lot of my output has come from there. And then where I studied in South Africa, and I did a lot of my academic research, especially for my master's, around queer representation on film and television. And that kind of forces you to have to look at African film as a whole. And a lot of the output is definitely trauma-based. It's easy to sell, it's easy to finance, just from a production standpoint. And Africa is definitely, and again, I don't want to be too general here because Africa is not a monolith, but for as long as we're still battling colonialism together, then we can still use those same references. It's easier to get trauma porn made. And I don't want to be too reductive because I do think that those stories are important, but I think what the things Nuri is trying to do, it's not all there is. It matters what people are able to see. And I know there are limits to representation politics, and I feel like a lot of the world is sort of getting to the ceiling of representation at the moment because there's only so much seeing yourself can do. At some point, we also have to look at what that representation stands for. Yeah, but putting that into context, I don't know, it's harder to get joyous films made. And we can theorize about why. We can talk about the cinema culture in Africa not necessarily being as developed. I'm not really interested in that narrative, but it is one. We can talk about I don't know, it's a lot. The scope of it is wide, but you're right, it is easier to get access to black pain, than it is to get access to black joy.
Yeah. So I actually would like to talk about, you said the cinema culture in Africa isn't as developed. What you mean by that?
I guess in the very literal sense of people going to watch specifically African films in theater. But if we're talking about decolonizing everything, we have to also look at how we view filmmaking. And there's a conversation to be had about, especially in Kenya, and I've also been responsible for holding this conversation in this format, but the idea that Kenyans love to go watch film, but they only watch Western films. They love their Avengers and whatnot, and I think that's true to a certain extent, but also we're consuming media from not just Africa, we're consuming media from the entire world, and that naturally forces us to kind of have to compare. Well, it doesn't force us, but we do end up naturally comparing, and you're going to want to consume the media that has a high production value, or the one that doesn't necessarily patronize you or just make you feel like you're only going to watch pain. So there's a bit of distrust that has definitely developed between audiences and filmmakers in Kenya, but we're bridging that gap slowly by telling them, look, we know that previously, like, the quality of the work wasn't as great and the content of the, but we have to grow from somewhere, and we're asking you to trust us with your stories if you come watch the stuff. So like there's that definitely that ongoing conversation happening, but it'll sound odd, but I have to throw it back to the education system as well, in the sense that it doesn't celebrate the creative art form like whatsoever. Like there are no film classes in high school, at least in like typical high schools in Kenya or typical schools in Kenya. There's no film education. So I don't expect a generation of people who've been raised to only respect STEM to now, develop a sudden and powerful love for film that's made here. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of ground that we have to cover. And it's fair that it's taking its time to get there. So the culture is being developed because now people recognize that, oh, I can have my story up there, and it can be truthful, and I can resonate with it. And I think that's what's exciting about making film here right now.
Got you. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there,
Yeah.
and there's a lot that I don't know about, but I just have questions and kind of comparisons to, I guess my perspective in the States when it comes to Black filmmakers, because historically, I feel like Black people didn't have access to cameras, back in like, before DSLRs, like unless you had money, you didn't have access to cameras. And like a lot of the bigger name directors, they had cameras when they were like 13. They had, super 8mm camera or whatever. And they started making films when they were teenagers. So by the time they were 30, they were already like a master filmmaker. And it feels like historically, Black filmmaker, like filmmaking requires money.
It's a very expensive endeavor. It just is, just the inaccessibility of the infrastructure required to make film can get very frustrating because I completely understand what you mean by like having, it's the ones who were using cameras at a certain age or in certain environments that have certain socioeconomic similarities that end up being quote unquote filmmakers, so to speak. And I think a lot of that is also true in Africa in some regards, because you do need, I have this theory that if cameras were accessible, not just the, like you're saying, not just the DSLR, like proper cameras were accessible in somewhere like Nairobi at like a decent rate, then we'd be having a different conversation. This isn't to say like that there isn't like a thriving, I don't want to call it underground, but like a thriving, I wouldn't even call it informal, the thriving industry where like no one is necessarily following the quote unquote tenets of what filmmaking is about. No one is treating it as this high art form. It's just entertainment, and it thrives. It's called Kenwood. You put two actors in a room and tell them the general idea of what they're doing in that scene. You say action, you put a camera in front of them, whatever comes out of their mouth, print, cut, next. And it's entertaining enough. And I think there's something in there, not to go into like the academic aspects of it, but one of the things that I was exploring as I want to kind of move towards decolonizing how we film in Africa is the idea of the griot, the narrator, right? How did Africans pre-colonially pass information? It was through storytelling. So we have the capacity for entertainment, and we entertain ourselves, and we've been entertaining ourselves. We're just, I always argue that it's a medium that's catching up to African storytelling, not the other way around. Like it's motion picture that needs to catch up to like how we communicate and how we share stories, not the other way around. So that's definitely like how I view, because I don't want to always like frame it as this if we had money, then we'd be able to make films, which is true. If we had money, we'd be able to make films. But like the core tenet of why we make films, why do we make films? It's not just so we can have this thing that only a few people can access. It's a storytelling medium. It's a way that we can hold up a mirror to society and tell them, hey, look at yourselves. This is what you're doing. You know, it's a form of observation. It's a form of witnessing. And so that all these aspects of why film is important and why it's valid, and those aspects are still reflected in African culture. So it's like, how do we, bridge that gap? And yeah, money is it. Money is the name.
But like you said, it's also about cultural values. It seems like in America, there's so many people pursuing the arts, and that's like normal.
Yeah.
And that has a cost to it. It has a cost because a lot of people that are pursuing this aren't going to make a living from it.
Yep.
And I get, I'm fortunate enough that, my mother, I have a Caribbean background. My mother's from Haiti. She wanted me to pursue something quote unquote more practical. But I was like, I don't want to do it. And it wasn't a big deal. But I do know a lot of, second generation Africans that their parents did not want them to pursue filmmaking, and it makes sense. They're not even wrong. You know what I mean? Like their parents aren't wrong. This shit is hard. Like most people aren't going to make a living the way they think they can. And that's not to discourage anybody. That's just a fact in regards to people being like A-list directors. In regards to A-list directors, like I do think people can make a living, but kind of those big ambitious dreams, it's just only so many people will actually break through at that level. And I don't know too much about cultural values of in Africa, but it like you said, it doesn't seem like your parents are going to want you to pursue something like this.
Yeah, no, fully. I mean, my situation is a bit unique, and I'll tell you why in a second. But like, just to add on to that, you're right. Like I try and look at like the decisions folks, of color, regardless of like which space. I feel like we all have the same parent. We have to do something practical. You have to be able to earn a living. And because all they saw from like there was no evidence to suggest that anyone who followed a path like we did would be able to like feed their family. Like it was difficult. It was a difficult path. It's a difficult path. It still is. So that sort of looking at it that way, it makes perfect sense. But then you have the crazy ones who understand that it's more than just the practical aspects of it for us. There's definitely a bit of a calling situation happening there. That I actually dig even deeper and link to like my ancestral heritage and the kind of gifts that I think I was given. I was kind of baked into my DNA, so to speak, as my, because Black people we don't get inheritances. We inherit generational trauma. But I feel like part of the thing that I inherited as well is like the capacity to tell stories, and it was just a no-brainer that I would end up in some way, in some form or some medium, telling stories. And that can be really tough for parents who don't understand that. So I absolutely get it. But my unique situation is that, so I'm queer, and it was difficult existing in a space in my mother's house because she had big dreams for me. As I have ADHD as well, so I was like one of those kids who had potential, but for some reason was struggling to meet it. Turns out I just had a neurological disability the entire time. And then I left home quite early because I was kicked out because I was gay. So I had to figure out my own way quite quickly. And through that journey, I ended up finding film unexpectedly, and started building my relationship with film in that regard. But I can only imagine like people who have stronger relationships with their parents at this time, or at certain stages in their life, it can be difficult to tell them, hey, I want to drop out of this really practical path to follow this thing that for sure might leave me hungry. But I guess that's our job in some regard, like this generation of filmmakers, to make sure that we create enough of a stable base that someone can say that they want to become a filmmaker in a couple of years and it's not as unrealistic as it felt back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, for people to go out and support those films.
Yeah, I want people to go and support the films, but I want them to only go and support the films if they see themselves in the film. Even if they don't see themselves in the film, if they see a film that has fidelity to some kind of truth that they recognize, go watch it. Yeah.
How do you feel about African stories now versus 10 years ago?
Oh man, like production value. First of all, we're beginning to get some of the coin, and anytime we bring in the conversation of money and whatever capitalistic interest we have in film, it always boils down to how many bums can you get on a seat to come watch your thing? How much money can you make from it? So me seeing a lot more content being made on the continent that is exciting and fresh and new means that we're now understanding that there is a group of people who are realizing that they also have a place in this medium and that they deserve to be seen. And now we're doing the work to make sure that they are seen. If I make a film about an African story right now, I'm going to have conversations with production about its international appeal. Like that is a given. Like that's the next conversation that you have with your producers, because it requires a ton of money to get these things made. And the only reason it becomes financially viable is either through charity or if there is an international market for it. But with like newer, better, more truthful stories coming out of Africa now compared to 10 years ago, there's a shift in like where the focus is. The target market is no longer like the film festival circuit. I guess it is in some ways, but like for me, it's not that. It's, am I telling a story that someone I grew up with would want to pay money to come watch? So that becomes the focus. At least for me, that becomes a shift. I want to make extremely culturally specific stories because that's how we get that like financial leg, bums on seats, because people are coming to see themselves. I'm not going to call people to come see themselves if I've made a film that skews to a target market that's not them. So it's this weird balance right now where we're it's an odd balance. It's hard to put like a name to it, but it's a weird dance where yes, Africans are spending, at least Kenyans are interested in consuming Kenyan stories in a really beautiful way that I think 10 years ago would not have been the case.
Prior to the pandemic, were Kenyans going to the movie theaters?
Yes, Kenyans sell out movie theaters, man. But like, to their credit, like it's not like there were a bunch of Kenyan films to go watch, because making films in Kenya is still difficult. At least making films, the kind of films that, again, I can't speak for everyone, but the kind of films that I would like to make or that I have made require just so much money that's just not there. The initial capital, like there's no infrastructure that is remotely accessible. So, sometimes you'll find like Kenya only churns out like 2 or 3 films that I would regard as really good. And again, I have my own opinions of what constitutes good films. I'm not the metric, but films that I would regard as being pretty good, we churn 1 or 2 out a year, which is not ideal, but it was better than like, again, 10, 20 years ago. So yeah, it's growing, it's slow, but they'll show up for like a big international release, which tells me that there's interest in sitting down and watching a film and paying for the experience of watching a film. So we just need to meet that demand. But in order to meet that demand, we need the money. Are you seeing how this is like a cyclical?
Yeah.
So to get the money, we need to get the audiences in, but we can't get the audiences in because we couldn't get the money to get the film made. it's a weird dance that we're doing at the moment. But I think the takeaway from me right now is understanding that yes, there is an audience, there is a paying audience that, because of their exposure to extremely high production, have a higher standard and expect more for the money that they're paying. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're harder on ourselves. So like, if I come and watch a story about queerness, I'm gonna rip it to shreds if it's not authentic. So if someone is coming to watch a story about a Kenyan experience, it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a weird balance that we're currently trying to do, but there is hope.
So the one or two movies, are good that are coming out of Kenya. Are they all from, like the money from NGOs, or is it by your standards any sort of thriving studio or production company system in Kenya that are by Kenyans, by Black people?
Very good question. I will get crucified for answering this question, but I'm going to try anyway. I haven't been exposed to a company a production company, or there are one or two production companies whose focus is primarily on like producing Kenyan stuff, but even they're still in that rut of needing to find the money. A lot of them are either producing television content, which is a lot easier and cheaper to make, or commercials, which where the money is. So you'll find like someone like, I know like a director like Tosh Kitonga does this a lot, where he spends, he goes and collects his money in commercials and then pours that money back into a project, to make it happen. But again, there's the other side of Kenyan filmmaking that doesn't necessarily, again, adhere to these standards that we have for what quote unquote constitutes good filmmaking, and they're churning out films just fine. But the films that like I would want to go watch, or at least I grew up watching or grew up being exposed to, that kind of quality, that kind of high budget, even if it's a low budget, like just good production, there's a good production value, they're harder to get made. And I don't think there's an industry that sustains it as of now. But it's coming. There's definitely like room for that to grow. So I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, it's definitely coming. It's going to be a slow, painful, gruesome process, but we're going to get there.
Yeah, it just sounds like there's so much potential in Africa to, grow an audience, to start production companies, and to create some sort of business model created by Black people for Black people. Like, it sounds like it's just waiting for it to thrive.
It's literally there. It does require a bit of a, it requires that initial investment that isn't attached to that with no stream. The thing is, as soon as you try and a lot of people have recognized that there's this gap in Africa for sure. But a lot of them definitely have strings attached in really dangerous and harmful ways. So you might even end up with a really good product, like some of the stuff that I've worked on, but the experience is just so soul destroying that we lose really good talent, or there's no sort of marketing plan afterwards, where they're dead ends, and they're definitely glass ceilings. I do think if we had the infrastructure without any strings attached, if we had that infrastructure, man, it could pop. It could really, really pop. Because we have audiences ready to hear their stories. We have really amazing, well-trained filmmakers who end up having to go elsewhere to kind of explore ways in which they could kind of expand a little. There's room. I mean, I studied in Cape Town, where like a ton of films come together. The space has been sort of converted into a shooting lot, where massive films come and replicate places in the world to come and shoot their stuff there. So we have the capacity, we have the expertise. It's just that issue of bridging that gap. That's a money problem.
It's coming, for sure. It's definitely coming in the coming years and decades, I believe. Now, there's been a number of African films that were produced and developed by non-African filmmakers. And most of the time they would have non-African A-list actors learning the accents, such as Don Cheadle in Hotel Rwanda. What is your take? What is your take on this?
Uh, uh, it's tricky because I definitely understand the production element of it and the money element of it. And if you have a name attached to it, it's easy to finance the project. It's easy to get the project publicized. It's easy to get eyes on the project. I understand the thought process behind it. I just wish people would go to the extent of wanting to have conversations about what it means to have other people tell your stories, particularly when you're not yet at the place where you can comfortably say we have an industry that is up and running and self-sustainable. So, it's I see both sides. I personally, I'm of the mind that I would like some level of authenticity, and it matters. I'm sorry, but it does matter. It matters to have the people who've experienced it tell the story. And even though the story is still being told, and it's told in a way that will make white people cry in theaters, it makes me feel like it wasn't made for us. And in many ways, it wasn't. But hey, any way we can move the needle, I guess. I think we're so used to taking scraps and being told that we need to be grateful that we even get the little bit that we get, that it gets frustrating to even imagine a space where like the industry relies solely on its own mechanism. So, my frustrations aside, I'm just going to focus on making sure that the mechanism works so that we don't have to have a conversation about so-and-so coming to pull a really bad African accent. I watched, I didn't watch it. I stopped watching it, but Coming to America too was a traumatic experience for me, and in many ways, because I do want to support like the African creatives who were part of it, but my God, in a year where Beyonce taught you all how to commit Africa to film, Jesus. It's frustrating. It's dehumanizing. It's demoralizing in many ways, but there's no but. That's just where it is. And I guess the people who understand how those models work and want to keep on using those models will keep on using those models. But some of us on the side, I'm gonna hope, at least me, I'm gonna hope that I get to work with partners who understand why it is important for people to actually see themselves on the screen truthfully. Because I want to make stories about my people. That's just it. I just want to make stories that I recognize. I struggle to watch African content or like Kenyan content that I can't resonate with, or South African content that I know a lot of South Africans do not resonate with. And we'll be yelling our heads off, but I do the thing that like what Russell T Davis did. I'm a huge fan of him with It's a Sin. He made it. He's been very vocal about the fact that he doesn't agree with casting non-queer people in queer roles. Without even going into detail for why he doesn't agree with it, but I get it. And then he did It's a Sin, which is a very queer television show that you should all go watch. I'm gonna cry as well. All the queer characters are played by queer actors, and his statement was, just look at the difference. And as a queer person, I saw the difference. So it emboldened me to kind of stick to my guns about like my metric for what authenticity looks like. Everyone has theirs, but I have mine.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important. When people go to the movies to feel like when it's supposed to feel real, that it feels real.
Yeah, like I said, it matters. Because how often do you actually get to see a story that reflects your life on the big screen? It's so rare. So to go and see it and then see it misrepresented in whatever way, whether it's in a performance that was good, but an accent that just kept on throwing you off, that's violence, man.
So what can we expect from you in the near future?
Good question. There are a few things that I'm working on. I'm trying to think about the things that I can actually talk about, and not many of them. But
that's a good problem to
have. I've kind of, I think, to just put it broadly, I've kind of committed to only being involved in stories that I fully believe in. at this like initial stage. Well, let me not say initial. My therapist keeps yelling at me because I seem to forget that there's an expanse of work that I put in before now. But at this stage in my career, I'm looking to build stories that are extremely specific to like my experiences growing up in Nairobi, living in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and now where I live in partly where I live in Amsterdam. So to be very broad about what I'm doing without fucking up any of my NDAs, I'm working on stories that reflect issues of identity because I am Black and queer and African, and so that's it. And just very, very, very specifically about Kenya in a way that will make a lot of people uncomfortable, but I'm okay with that because I think like we deserve to have like amazing production value for a story that's entirely in like Swahili or Sheng. And I'm not necessarily bothered about like whether it'll have international appeal because I think the more specific you make a story, the more universal it becomes, and that has been a shift for me. It's difficult to fund projects like these, but I'm committed to it. I think the long-term goal is I do want to create a space. I know a lot of people start with that. I don't want to create a space, but I do want to create a space where like anyone who is interested in making film gets to or making content about Africa gets to develop that, because I feel like that's the gap that we're missing when it comes to like being able to tell our own stories. I want to be able to pay a writer to sit in their house for 6 months and just churn out this beautiful story that they have. But right now we're having to, do way too much, give way too much for far too little.
Yeah.
And I just want to correct that balance a bit. But for myself, it's just stories about Nairobi, about queerness, about growing up, knowing that I'm going to have battles with the classification board in Kenya, but it's fine. I'm ready.
Some of the best art is one that pushes the boundaries and challenges the audiences. So I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, the goal isn't necessarily the pushing of the boundaries will happen organically. I think the more, if you attach fidelity to truth and make that your anchor and make that your north and move in that direction, it is going to rub people off the wrong way, and that's fine. But it's also going to do the thing where someone will go into a theater to look at something and see themselves and understand themselves better, and that's enough for me.
Actually, I have another question, because we've kind of talked about Africans developing an infrastructure for film culture in Africa, but there's an alternative route. For example, Africans don't necessarily have to do that, and I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just putting, this is the question I'm going to propose. I'm going to ask you. It doesn't seem like you're on this path, but maybe you are. But I'm wondering, what about the path of Hollywood? Do you have an interest, or do you have colleagues that have an interest of going the Hollywood route and then kind of bringing it back home, sort of thing? Like a lot of British films, a lot of British filmmakers, they make huge Oscar-worthy films, and they're still based,
Yeah, and then going back to, look, some people have done a really good job at that. I know Honori, for instance, is doing brilliant things in the States, in Hollywood, and she's one of those people who kind of always, she's homegrown in many ways, and like her base has always been Africa in a really interesting and beautiful way, but she's expanding into like the rest of the world. And I think that would probably be my trajectory. I'm more interested in making sure that Africa feels my attention and gets my talent. I mean, there's no use in being in training for so long and doing all these things and not being able to actually facilitate the growth of the industry that I recognize. But some people want to go to Hollywood, and that's fine. But I have a sneaky suspicion that there are battles there that have to be fought as well, and that's great, but I only have the capacity to fight certain battles, and I can't be fighting a battle on both this front on the continent and also in America. I think you know, because of the resources and because of the history that film has in America, they have definitely dominated it because there's infrastructure, there's an order, there's a system that functions, and that's great. But we need to develop a system here. It sounds insane when I say it, but because I don't know how to do it just yet, but I know it has to be here, and I have to start here. And I'm happy for Hollywood to come look for me as opposed to the other way around.
Gotcha. No, I think that's a a valid approach, and there isn't a right or wrong way. It's, I guess, it's about the path that you choose.
Yeah, everyone needs to be able to do the thing that will get them, the thing that they're comfortable with, the thing that harms people the least, the thing that will get them to where the desired goal is at the moment. My desired goal is to be able to turn on the TV and see a ton of Kenyan television shows and films done really well, really intentionally, really beautifully. And I think that's possible. I've been blessed in my life to be in spaces where I have the capacity to focus exclusively on African stories. And I want to see how far I can push that and how wide I can leave this door open, how far down I can pull the ladder. And that's not the goal necessarily, but that's part of that's the job. That's the job as it is right now. We have to move that needle. We just have to. For our industry to be sustained, for my film to be watched 20 years from now, we have to create that space because it's not there. And if it's not there, someone has to do it. So I'm happy to be a part of that journey.
Dope. Well, Silas, is there anything else that you want to add before we let you go?
Watch more African films, fund more African films. One more thing, I'd like Africa to get the space and room to figure itself out because we're navigating a lot all the time, and so everything isn't exactly like a lot of people would want it to be, but we get to take the space to figure that out. We get to make the mistakes. We get to make the ridiculous and weird projects, and that's a necessary step for growth. So if everyone could just get off our dicks for a bit, that'd be great. But that's it. We're doing the best we can with a lot.
This is a family show, Silas. This is a family podcast. You can't say that. This is a family podcast.
That bit. My mother will listen to it later.
Well, thank you, Silas. This was an amazing conversation. I feel like there could be several episodes just about the potential that Africa has for some sort of filmmaking infrastructure and how to navigate and build that out. Where can people watch Supermoto, and where can people find you on the internet?
You can, I think Supermodo is on. I would be lying to you if I told you I knew it was. It's somewhere in that's how far removed I am from that film right now. You can find some of my films on Netflix. You can find I'm not sure you can find Supermodo there. I'm sure the copy is available for sale. No, I'm lying. It should be on Amazon if I'm not wrong. If you want to find me, I am at Silas Miami on all social platforms except Facebook. I left that puppy, but come talk to me if you want to make some cool films. But no, please don't come to me if you want to be a white savior. Calm down.
I don't
want that. I don't want any of. No. I'm not negotiating with white people who don't understand the space that they're entering when they come to Africa and they want to come and save us. We don't need saving. If you want to help, do it from a place of authenticity or sit down.
Got you. I don't know how many white people are listening to this.
But they always find a way.
Put that in the universe. It's all right to put it in the universe. What are some of the films that you were part of on Netflix?
I think there's only one at the moment, and it's Disconnect on Netflix. I wrote that. I adapted that from my screenplay.
Nice.
So you can check that out. You can check Lusala out, which is another film that we put out. I'm not sure where that is either, because that was also a charity gig. But if you look for me, Silas Miami, in all spaces, we can talk.
Dope. Thank you so much, Silas.
Yeah, you're most welcome, Reggie.
Thanks for listening to the Black Film Space podcast. If you're interested in attending our events, becoming a member, or donating to our mission, please visit us at blackfilmspace.com. Also, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Black Film Space. Subscribe to our email list and podcast. All right, peace out, and see you soon.